In the last movie, we used the session to store the user ID whenever a user logs in. But we don't yet have any code that checks for that user ID to determine whether a user should be granted access to a page or not. To go back to our metaphor, it's like we validated a ticket holder and gave them a hand stamp, but there's no one at the concert door that's checking for hand stamps. So that's the code that we'll add in this movie. To do that, we'll make use of another feature in Rails called before filters. Before filters are a bit like callbacks. They allow you to perform a task before a controller action is executed. And the syntax is going to be similar to callbacks too. The big difference is that before filters are for controllers exclusively, while callbacks are for models exclusively. Let's take a look at the syntax. So we have before filter, and then a method name, and then later on we define what that method is. That's the same way that callbacks work. Remember, we had before save, and we had a callback name, and then we had the definition of that callback later on. One difference with before filters is that we can pass in options for either except or only, so that we can list off the other actions to which this filter should apply. So apply to all of the actions in this controller except for login, attempt login, and log out. Or we could do the reverse of that. Before filter confirmed logged in only for the index and menu page. It doesn't make a difference which way you declare it. Notice also that I'm making use of Ruby's private to make all the methods that are below private so that only this class can call them. That's especially important to do in our controllers because otherwise this becomes an action that the user could access from the URL of their browser, and we don't want that. This is just a method that we'll be using internally inside the access controller. So as I said, we can specify which methods activate the filter with only and except, and we should make sure that all of our before filters are private or protected methods so that they can't be called as actions. And then the last thing, the most important point about before filters, is that we must return false if we want to halt the filter chain. So if we want to stop additional actions from happening, if we want to say, all right, whatever I've decided is final, don't do anything else. Just take what I said and let's end it there. We have to return false. Let's add a confirm logged in before filter to our application. So let's go into our controllers and let's start by going to our access controller. So here I have all of the different methods and I've just rolled them up in TextMate so that they take up less space. So right after the layout definition here, I'm just going to put before filter and then confirm logged in. So that's what it's going to do. Now, as we saw, we want to do that only on index and menu, or the opposite of that would be if we said except and do it only for login, attempt login, and log out. So those won't need it, the other ones will. So now we need to actually add the methods going to do the checking. So down here, I'm just going to put at the bottom, confirmed login. Unless we have a user ID, then we want to say, please log in and redirect them to the login page. And then return false. That will halt the before filter. Very important. Otherwise, just return true. Now, as I said, this needs to be a private method. That way it can't be called as an action. Let's try this out. So let's open up our terminal and Rails server. Let's go to Firefox, localhost 3000, and let's try to go to, actually admin will take us there. It redirected us to the please log in page. Let's try to go to access index. Oh, redirected us to the login page again. You can see how it's keeping us out. Now let's try and let's actually log in. K Skogland. The password I had before was secret password. Now I'm logged in and now I'm able to go to the menu. Now I'm able to go to access index as well. Now I notice one detail here that we should go ahead and fix, which is logged in as we haven't set. That's something we know how to do. Let's just do that real quick. Let's go to access to the menu, logged in as, and guess what they're logged in as? They're logged in as session username. And they shouldn't be able to get to this page unless we have that username stored. Just make sure I gave it the right name. Username, all one word. Good. So that should now display the username. Let's just reload it and see. There it is. Now it shows what username we're logged in as. So that's all there is to using a before filter, but there's one more change that we need to make here, which is that we don't want to just have this before filter for the access controller. We also want to restrict access to our pages controller, sections controller, and subjects controller. So before filter confirmed logged in, I'll just copy that part. Let's go ahead and just put that at the top of all of these. So right after we do the layout, before filter confirmed login, sections, we'll do the same thing. Right after layout, confirmed login, and pages. Just jump up to the top. And for filter confirmed login. Okay, so now I've got it in all three of those, but those don't have this method. We don't want to repeat ourselves by copying and pasting the same method there. Instead, what we're going to do is cut it, and we're going to move that method to the application controller. So the application controller is the superclass that all other controllers inherit from. Notice this, access controller inherits from application controller. So anything that goes in application controller becomes part of access controller. It has access to it. So now confirmed login is a method that is defined in access controller, subjects controller, sections controller, and pages controller. It's also going to be defined in demo controller. Now whether we use it or not is up to us, but it is defined in each of them. There's one other change we need to make here though, which is that because it's now in the superclass, you're going to want to make this protected instead of private. And that way the subclasses can still access it. It's not for use just by this class, it's for use by this class and its subclasses. There's one other little change that we need to make now that we've moved it to the application controller, which is that we're redirecting to the login action. Well, if we're in the subjects controller and it redirects to login, well, there is no login action. Where is that trying to redirect to? I don't see that in that list. So we need to specify that what we actually want is to go to the controller access. So go to the access controller and to the login action. Now let's try it all out. Let's try and go now to our subjects. Okay, we got there fine. Let's try access log out. We're logged out. Now let's try and go back to subjects. Oh, and it redirected us to the login page. So we're now successfully restricting access to make sure that someone is logged in. So before filters are a really easy way to do very common tasks, especially things that you're going to be doing multiple times in a single controller or in multiple controllers. The one catch is just to make sure that you do return false if you want it to stop and not continue running the action. Otherwise, it'll do this task and then it will go right ahead and actually run the code that's in the action as well, which is obviously not what we want in this case. We want to stop it from proceeding. And with that, we conclude the implementation of our user authentication. We're able to put passwords in the database in an encrypted form. We're able to log users in and compare those values to make sure that they are authenticated. We're able to keep track of the fact that they're authenticated, and we're able to restrict their access to pages if they're not authenticated.